managers. I want to take a perspective on from your leadership vantage point. What is the difference between a leader and a manager? I'm curious.
I think it's an unnecessary question. I think that there's a historically known narrative that distinguishes between leadership and management. So management is execution and controlling the outcome of activities and making sure that the people that are, handling different activities are doing their jobs and all of that. And leadership is supposed to be some kind of broader narrative that's more strategic and visionary and sort of sets the tone for the organization, maybe a little bit more distant from the day-to-day. But I personally think that's a lot of BS. I think those are all false dichotomies. I think management is something that good leaders do when they need to do it. And leadership is what the best managers learn to do. And so I think we've, as a culture in the West in particular, I think we've wasted a lot of time with these kind of false narratives. Like, are you a manager or are you a leader? Like, who cares? What you need to be is creating an environment where everyone lives out their full potential as a human being in the environment where you have influence. If you want to call it management, it's management. If you want to call it leadership, it's leadership. The distinction that you're asking about, and it's a very valid question. So I don't mean to be dismissive, but the question itself evolved out of an industrial age mindset. Frederick Taylor, back in the early 20th century, created structures when Henry Ford, built cars that needed something called industrial psychology and management science. But when you think about what they were trying to do is they were trying to reduce human beings to machines. And 100 years later, which is almost exactly, it's probably about 100 years exactly, we are doing exactly the opposite. We already have all the machines we need. And what we need to do is to stop seeing human beings as machines. Because we have AI, we have robots, we have all that, and they become more accessible all the time. So we can automate just about anything. What is left for humans then to be is creative, artistic, solving problems, creating a world. So I'm not really interested in the distinction between leadership and management. I think that the whole thing kind of came out of a different time. We don't live in that time anymore. So I'm not sure if you like that answer.
No, I think it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. And so when you're leading an organization and when you bring in people, I think as a leader you pick lot of, and you're right in saying that lot of BS about you don't want to be a manager, you want to be a leader. And many times that distinction was, so if you are a manager or if you are so-called called manager in an organization, you always try to sort of either be belittle about your effort and saying no, you should be managing, you should be leading, not managing. And
Right.
sometimes it gets very, very hazy, as you rightly said, that it's very difficult to distinct, are you a manager or are you a leader, or how to distinguish between the two. So I think
to me, it's artificial.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it in my example of a surgeon. When the surgeon is doing surgery, and I watched, he's very much in execution mode. Hand me the scalpel, and so it's very tactical. So that would be management, right? He's not sitting up above watching, going, you do this and you do this and you do this. No, he's right in there doing it. And it's like saying that the architect is above the construction people. Now, on one level, the architect might have the plans, might have the bigger picture, but I don't know if you've ever worked with an architect, but every architect I've ever worked with, they love to get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
They're in there bugging they're like, the plumbing goes this way and I bought it this way and I don't want it like that way. And the construction guy is like, get out, get out. You're supposed to be the architect.
Mm.
And then my construction workers one of them renovated my house. He came up with this beautiful design. I'm like thinking to myself, oh, you're just a contractor. And he's like, but I'm an artist. That's what makes him a great contractor, is because he's more than a contractor. He's an artist. So the distinction is really a false distinction. And the best leaders manage, and the best managers lead.
I think that's beautifully put, and thank you for enlightening on that. So, from your vantage point, what are some of the misconceptions when it comes to leadership today? So, when someone comes to you, what are some of the misconceptions that you find that people have about leadership? I'm curious.
Oh, yeah. Well, number one, I already mentioned that you have to be charismatic. I don't find that to be true at all. There's no science that demonstrates that. Number two, that you have to be more senior, that you have to be more experienced. Yes, it can help, but it's not required. I was working with the CEO of this startup for a couple of years, and he, as I said, wanted to build the culture of the organization. I encouraged him to have engagement conversations, as we discussed. And he asked me, who should I have facilitate those discussions, cross-functional discussions of values? And I said, because he thought it should be only the senior people. And I said, well, why don't you send an email to the whole company and ask who's interested? See what happens. 24-year-old woman from Venezuela, beautiful, young, brilliant Latina, wrote to him and said, I love this idea. This is something that I've always thought we should do, is build the culture from the ground up. And I love this company. Can I help facilitate? And he was like, Jeff, should I let this 24-year-old woman facilitate conversations? Well, you know the punchline. She was excellent at it. She's now running the engagement process for this whole company that now has 300 people. So, that's another myth, that you have to have a certain amount of experience or be a certain age. That doesn't mean that every single 22-year-old, I'm managing one right now, actually, they don't all they're not all capable of running the company, but they shouldn't be dismissed. They should be listened to and they should be nurtured. So those are some of the myths, I would say. And, there's a long list. I could probably go on for a long time, but that's